scenario that people go through depression and grief and the passing away of the near and dear ones, and then suddenly they cannot go to the funeral. you know it can be confusing, and we want to talk about that because in the early days when people got COVID a couple months ago, nobody was allowed. The hospital just took the body, gave it to a funeral home. It was burnt, cremated, buried. Nobody saw, nobody heard, nothing. They were only told.
Exactly.
Now, the people got the same COVID. I don't know if there is a difference with COVID 19 and COVID in 2020, but it's the same COVID 19. And people got COVID. The families are getting the bodies back. Cemeteries are burying the people, and they got their family and their members coming by, and they are there. Some places they allow them, everybody come by, only with a mask. They wear their mask. And there are
Yeah.
some places where people die from COVID and no one is allowed, only 5 people. These are some confusion. So my point is, if 5 people attend a funeral service of
Yeah.
someone who got COVID, what is the difference with 50 people attending
Yeah.
around that person? Would
Yeah.
5 people not get COVID, or 50 people it's possible to get COVID? Are they getting the COVID from the living people around them, or are they getting the COVID from the dead person? You see the point I'm getting at? I don't
Yeah.
want politicians to feel that I'm attacking them, but some things don't make sense to me. 5 people around a dead body that had COVID. I think one person can get the COVID if they gotta get it from a dead person. And I don't understand the difference with the 50 people being allowed and the 5 people being allowed, or nobody being allowed. It's either nobody being allowed, or the 50 and the 15, are they not being allowed because they're not allowed to get COVID from each other who are alive? Or are they not getting it from the person who is dead? You see the point that I'm getting at?
I guess I can speak to the mental health aspect of this scenario, um, versus the infectious disease aspect of it. And when there is a loss of a loved one, attending funeral services and regrouping with loved ones and family members of the deceased is a part of the healing process, and it's part of the bereavement process. And usually, when someone loses a loved one, they go through the stages of grief. So, having the opportunity to attend a funeral service with other family members brings closure, and it helps healing from that loss. Now, what had happened during COVID, unfortunately, when people were unable to attend services, they were unable to be at the bedside of the deceased. They were not able to say their goodbyes. That had a different effect on their bereavement and their healing process, and the way in which they were coping with the stages of grief. So there's a lot of trauma associated with that now, because they weren't able to go through those steps that normally we were able, or people were able to go through before COVID. So the mind had an impact. It affected the mind in such a way that not only were someone at a loss because someone died in their family of COVID, but then no one could be there. No one could attend the services. People couldn't pray in congregation. Even in our community, there's a huge emphasis on praying in congregation. So now, whether it's a moment of mourning or a moment of celebrating, not being able to congregate had an effect on people's mental health. It made them more depressed. It made the healing process a lot longer, the grief process a lot longer. And like you said, some people are having PTSD. They have flashbacks. They have the psychological cues from, the what they experienced during that time period. So there is an impact on the mental health of people because of those changes that they had to experience. What was normal wasn't happening during COVID. They weren't able to make those arrangements and pay those respects to their loved ones. And so they feel not only did they lose out on the loved ones, but they lost out on that process as well. So there's a lot of healing. There's a lot of healing that people need to do from that time. You know, as far as the rules, I can't speak to that because I don't make those rules, and I'm not a politician, and I don't know, you know, what the guidelines in each community are exactly. But in general, as a community, I think that was something that delayed the healing process. It made the bereavement process harder, not to be able to congregate, not to be able to attend services, which are normally something that brings comfort and closure to the family members of whoever, you know, may have passed away.